The year was 1851, when the vast Wyoming wilderness stretched before settlers like an endless ocean of untamed beauty. Between towering mountains and sweeping plains, where winter brought merciless cold and summer offered brief respite, survival depended on strength, resilience, and community. This is the extraordinary story of Morning Sky, a young Shoshone girl born without a voice, and Sarah Mitchell, a widowed frontier doctor who saw beyond silence to discover a remarkable gift that would change both their lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Wild River Valley, nestled between the snow-capped peaks of the Wyoming Territory like a secret paradise, hidden from the relentless march of western expansion. For generations, the northern Shoshone had called these lands home, living in harmony with the changing seasons and harsh demands of mountain life. They understood the delicate balance required to survive in a land as beautiful as it was unforgiving. In a small encampment near the valley's heart, beneath a canopy of ancient pines, lived the family of Chief Running Elk. Respected for his wisdom and fairness in leading his people, Running Elk had navigated the increasing encroachment of white settlers with careful diplomacy, preserving peace while protecting Shoshone traditions. His wife, Singing Bird, was known throughout the tribe for her gift of healing and knowledge of medicinal plants that grew in the hidden corners of the valley. Their daughter, Morning Sky, had entered the world on a dawn painted with extraordinary colors, deep purples melting into brilliant oranges and pinks that seemed to set the heavens ablaze. The unusual beauty of that sunrise was taken as a powerful omen, a sign that this child would bring something special to her people. But when the infant failed to cry out, when no sound passed her tiny lips in those crucial first moments, the celebration dimmed. Days passed, then weeks, and still no sound came from the child. "She is cursed," whispered the tribal elders. Their faces solemn with concern. "A child without voice cannot call to the spirits. She cannot sing the sacred songs or tell the stories of our ancestors." But Singing Bird refused to accept such judgment. "My daughter speaks through her eyes," she insisted, cradling the silent infant. "The Great Spirit has given her different gifts, ones we must be patient to discover." As Morning Sky grew from infant to child, her silence remained absolute. No words, no laughter, no cries of pain ever escaped her lips. Yet something remarkable became apparent to those who paid attention. Where other children learned through instruction and imitation, Morning Sky observed the world with extraordinary intensity. Her dark eyes missed nothing: the subtle changes in medicinal plants through seasons, the behaviors of animals before storms approached, the almost imperceptible shifts in a person's expression that revealed hidden thoughts. By her 10th year, Morning Sky had developed a complex system of hand gestures to communicate with her family. But more remarkable was her connection to the natural world. Plants seemed to flourish beneath her touch. She could locate healing herbs that others walked past without noticing. She sensed when animals were injured or sick, often leading her mother to them, so Singing Bird could apply her healing knowledge. "She sees what we cannot," Singing Bird told her husband as they watched their daughter gently tending a patch of rare healing roots. "The Great Spirit closed her mouth but opened her eyes in ways we cannot understand." Running Elk nodded slowly, love for his daughter evident in his weathered face, though worry lined his brow. "But the tribe grows restless," Medicine Woman speaks, "against her presence at ceremonies. Says her silence offends the spirits and brings misfortune." Indeed, the tribe's fortunes had turned in recent years. Game grew scarcer as white hunters decimated buffalo herds. Territorial conflicts with neighboring tribes increased as all were pushed into smaller territories. Disease, brought by white Settlers had claimed several tribal members during the previous winter, and now drought threatened their summer hunting grounds. "She is the daughter of a chief," Singing Bird replied firmly. "Her place is with us, with her people." But tribal superstition proved stronger than a mother's conviction. When a harsh winter storm destroyed half their food stores, when 3 children fell ill with fever in the same moon, when hunters returned empty-handed from territories that had always provided bountifully, whispers grew to open accusations. Morning Sky, now 12, understood more than the adults realized. She saw the sideways glances, noticed how mothers pulled their children away when she approached, felt the growing hostility directed toward her family because of her presence. Despite her parents' protection, she could not escape the weight of being viewed as a burden, a curse upon people she loved. The tribal council gathered on a night when the moon hung full and bright above the valley. Morning Sky sat outside her family's dwelling, weaving a small basket from reeds she had gathered that morning. Her fingers worked with practiced precision, while her ears strained to catch the voices from the council fire. Though she could not hear the words clearly, the tone told her everything. Anger, fear, desperation, emotions that had been building for months now poured forth in a torrent directed at the silent girl who could not defend herself. Inside the council circle, Medicine Woman stood before the gathered elders, her ancient face set with grim certainty. "The signs cannot be ignored," she declared, her voice carrying authority earned through decades of spiritual leadership. "Since the Voiceless One came to us, the buffalo have vanished, the rains refuse to fall, and sickness stalks our children. The spirits are displeased by her unnatural presence among us." Running Elk rose to his feet, his tall frame illuminated by firelight. "My daughter has harmed no one. She works harder than many with twice her years. The drought affects all tribes in the territory, not just ours. The sickness came from white traders, not from Morning Sky. Yet it is your family that remains untouched by illness," countered an elder whose grandson had succumbed to fever. "Perhaps because the curse she carries protects her own blood while bringing suffering to others." Singing Bird stepped forward, her usual gentle demeanor hardened by maternal protection. "My daughter helps me prepare medicines that have saved many of your lives. Her eyes see plants I would miss. Her hands know which roots will heal and which will harm. This is not curse, but gift." But fear had taken root too deeply. After hours of heated debate, the council reached its decision. While they would not banish a chief's daughter outright, such dishonor could not be borne. Morning Sky would be excluded from all tribal ceremonies, kept apart from other children, and no longer permitted to assist in gathering medicinal plants for the tribe's use. "Until her 14th summer," pronounced Medicine Woman, "when she must undertake the vision quest. If the spirits speak to her despite her silence, we will know she is not cursed. If they remain silent as she is silent, she cannot remain among us." Running Elk and Singing Bird returned to their dwelling with heavy hearts. How could they explain to their daughter that she had been condemned not for any wrongdoing, but simply for being different? How could they make her understand that the tribe's fear had overcome their sense of compassion and justice? But Morning Sky required no explanation. One look at her parents' faces told her everything. With deliberate movements, her hands formed the gestures she used to communicate with her family. "I bring pain to your hearts," she signed, tears gathering in her dark eyes. "The tribe suffers because of me." "No, little one," Singing Bird knelt beside her daughter, pulling her close. "The tribe suffers because they cannot see beyond their fear to recognize your gifts. They look for someone to blame rather than facing the true causes of our hardships." Running Elk sat heavily beside them, his face revealing the conflict between his role as chief and his love as a father. "We will change their minds," he promised, though doubt shadowed his words. "Before your vision quest comes, they will see your worth." But Morning Sky knew better. She had witnessed how fear could blind people to truth, how easier it was to blame the different than to accept that some hardships came to all, regardless of belief or behavior. That night, as her parents finally slept, she made a decision that no child should ever have to make. Taking only a small medicine pouch her mother had made for her, a blanket, and the knife her father had given her for skinning small game. Morning Sky slipped away from the encampment. The full moon lit her path as she headed toward the eastern edge of the valley. She had no destination in mind, only the certainty that her absence would bring peace to her family and tribe. As she paused at the valley's edge, looking back one last time at the only home she had ever known, Morning Sky did not know that fate was already drawing her toward an encounter that would transform not only her life, but the understanding of what it truly meant to speak with power in a world that valued only certain kinds of voices. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 20 miles east of Wild River Valley, nestled in a clearing carved from the wilderness, stood the fledgling settlement of Pine Creek. Unlike the larger established towns sprouting across the Wyoming Territory, Pine Creek consisted of barely 24 structures: a general store, a small church, a blacksmith, and scattered homesteads belonging to families brave or desperate enough to stake their futures on this remote frontier. Among these pioneers was Sarah Mitchell, a woman whose life had been defined by both tragedy and remarkable resilience. Her 32, Sarah had already lived several lifetimes of experience. Raised in Boston by a prominent physician father who believed women deserved education equal to men, Sarah had studied medicine alongside him from childhood. When the Medical College of Philadelphia reluctantly admitted her, one of the few women of her generation granted such opportunity, she had excelled despite constant skepticism from male colleagues. Her marriage to Thomas Mitchell, a fellow doctor with similarly progressive views, had brought her west 5 years earlier. Together, they had planned to establish medical care for underserved frontier communities. Those dreams shattered when a sudden outbreak of typhoid claimed Thomas's life, just 18 months after their arrival, leaving Sarah alone in territory still considered wilderness by most Easterners. "You should return east, Mrs. Mitchell," Reverend Collins had suggested gently after Thomas's funeral. "A widow alone has no place in these harsh lands. Your father would surely welcome you home." But Sarah had merely straightened her shoulders, her grief fresh, but her resolve unbroken. "Oh, my work is here, Reverend. There's no doctor for 50 miles in any direction. These people need me more than Boston does." The settlers of Pine Creek had initially viewed the female physician with suspicion, particularly after her husband's death. Women were expected to teach, to nurse under male supervision, or to marry and bear children, not to diagnose illness, set broken bones, or deliver babies without a man's guidance. Yet necessity often overcame prejudice on the frontier. When 8-year-old Jimmy Peterson nearly died from a ruptured appendix, when Martha Davis hemorrhaged during a difficult childbirth, when old Samuel Wilson's gangrenous foot required amputation, it was Sarah Mitchell's skilled hands that saved them. Gradually, respect replaced doubt. Sarah's small cabin, with its attached examining room, became a place of both healing and community. She grew herbs in carefully tended gardens, combining conventional medical training with remedies learned from local tribes and frontier women. Her reputation spread beyond Pine Creek, drawing patients from remote homesteads and occasionally even from native communities brave enough to trust a white healer. On this particular morning in early autumn, Sarah rode her chestnut mare along Pine Creek's eastern boundary, her medical bag secure behind the saddle. Martha Wilson, the blacksmith's wife, was 8 months pregnant with a breech baby that Sarah had been monitoring weekly. The visit had gone well. The baby had finally turned to the proper position, leaving Sarah free to take the longer route, and home through the forest she loved. "What do you think, Penny?" she asked the mare, patting her glossy neck. "Shall we gather some of that golden seal by the North Creek before heading back? My supplies are running low." The horse nickered softly, in response, familiar with these solitary excursions. Sarah often talked to Penny on these rides, her only companion through many difficult days. The isolation of frontier life weighed heavily at times, especially in the quiet evenings when memory of her shared dreams with Thomas returned most powerfully. As they approached the small creek that marked the boundary between settled land and unclaimed wilderness, Sarah noticed something unusual. Eagle-eyed from years of searching for specific plants among the forest underbrush, she spotted a splash of color that didn't belong, something red against the browns and greens of early autumn foliage. "Whoa, girl," she murmured, reining Penny. "Do a stop." Squinting through dappled sunlight, Sarah made out what appeared to be a small figure huddled at the base of a large pine tree. "Hello," she called out. "Are you hurt?" No response came, but the figure stirred slightly, confirming it was indeed a person. Dismounting quickly, Sarah approached with the caution frontier life had taught her. As she drew closer, she realized it was a child, a native girl of perhaps 12 or 13 years, wrapped in a red blanket that had caught Sarah's attention. The girl's clothes were traditional Shoshone in design, but torn and dirty from what appeared to be several days of rough travel. "Hello there," Sarah said gently, crouching down several feet away to appear less threatening. "I'm Sarah. I'm a doctor, a healer. Are you injured?" The girl's dark eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and exhaustion, studied Sarah intently. She made no sound, no movement, except to pull her blanket tighter around thin shoulders. A small leather pouch hung around her neck, and Sarah noticed dried blood on the girl's moccasins and legs. Not from injury, she quickly assessed, but from traveling too far without adequate protection. "You're a long way from your people," Sarah continued softly, noticing the subtle signs of dehydration in the girl's chapped lips and the unhealthy flush to her cheeks that suggested the beginning of fever. "Are you lost? Can you tell me your name?" The girl stared back, intelligence evident in her gaze despite her obvious exhaustion. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her hands and made several gestures that Sarah didn't understand. Then, seeming to realize the futility of this communication, the girl touched her throat and shook her head. Understanding dawned. "You cannot speak," Sarah said, not as a question, but a statement. The girl nodded once, relief flickering across her features at being understood. "Are you hungry?" Sarah mimed eating, then reached slowly into her saddlebag to withdraw a small parcel of cornbread she'd brought for her midday meal. The girl hesitated only briefly before accepting the offering, her dignity evident even as she ate with the desperate speed of someone who hadn't seen proper food in days. Sarah used this moment to assess her new acquaintance more thoroughly with a healer's practiced eye. Despite her bedraggled state, the girl showed signs of having been well cared for before whatever circumstances had brought her to this creek bed. Her hair, though tangled now, had been neatly braided in a traditional style. The beadwork on her clothing, though simple, was skillfully done. Most telling was the small medicine pouch, similar to those Sarah had seen worn by respected tribal healers. "You've traveled far," Sarah observed as the girl finished eating. "It's not safe for anyone to be alone in these woods, especially not a child." The girl's expression hardened slightly at being called a child, and Sarah found herself smiling, despite the seriousness of the situation. "My apologies. You're clearly capable of taking care of yourself, but even so, you need shelter and proper food. Night comes quickly this time of year, and you have the beginnings of fever." Sarah considered her options. The nearest Shoshone encampment was at least 2 days' ride, and she couldn't be certain this girl belonged to that particular band. Taking her to Pine Creek carried its own risks. Many settlers harbored deep prejudice against native people, blaming them for everything from lost livestock to failed crops. Sheriff Taylor was reasonable enough, but he would insist on trying to return the girl to her people immediately, without consideration for her current condition or whatever circumstances had caused her to flee in the first place. The girl watched, Sarah's face with unnerving intensity, seeming to follow each thought as it crossed the doctor's mind. Then, with deliberate movements that belied her weakened state, she reached for a stick and began drawing in the soft earth between them. Sarah watched, fascinated, as crude but effective pictures emerged: a tribal encampment, a family, other tribal members with angry faces, and finally the girl herself walking away. "You left your people," Sarah interpreted slowly. "Not lost. You chose to leave." The girl nodded emphatically. "Were you in danger? Did someone hurt you?" Sarah asked, concern deepening. The girl shook her head, then touched her throat again before, pointing to the angry faces in her drawing. Understanding came gradually. "Because you cannot speak? They rejected you because you have no voice?" Tears welled in the girl's eyes for the first time, a single nod confirming Sarah's interpretation. Something fierce and protective awoke in Sarah's heart, a feeling she hadn't experienced since losing her husband and the dreams they'd shared. This child's situation stirred memories of her own battles against rejection and prejudice in medical school, where professors had insisted women lacked the intellectual capacity for medicine, where male students had deliberately excluded her from study groups and practical demonstrations. "Well," Sarah said, her decision made, "I don't believe people should be judged by what they lack, but by what they offer. And I suspect you have much to offer indeed." Standing, she extended her hand to the girl. "I have a small cabin with plenty of room for 2. You need rest and proper care for those feet before infection sets in. Will you come with me, at least until you're well enough to decide your next path?" The girl hesitated, studying Sarah's face with that same penetrating gaze. Whatever she sought there, she seemed to find it. With a grace that transcended her battered condition, she accepted Sarah's hand and rose to her feet. "I should call you something," Sarah mused as she helped the girl mount Penny. "Until I learn your real name." The girl touched the small medicine and pouch at her neck, then pointed upward to where morning light filtered through the pine branches above them. "Morning medicine?" Sarah guessed. The girl shook her head, then made a sweeping gesture across the sky. "Morning sky," Sarah translated, somehow certain she'd understood correctly. A smile, the first Sarah had seen, transformed the girl's solemn face, bringing unexpected beauty to features strained by hardship. "Morning sky it is then," Sarah said, mounting behind her new charge. "Let's get you home before that fever worsens. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." As they rode toward Pine Creek, Sarah was acutely aware that she was potentially inviting trouble into her carefully constructed life. The settlement tolerated her unconventional position as a female physician because she provided an essential service. Housing a native child, especially one who had apparently left her tribe voluntarily, would strain that tolerance severely. Yet something about Morning Sky's silent dignity, her obvious intelligence, and the injustice of her rejection resonated too deeply for Sarah to ignore. Perhaps it was simply the doctor's instinct to heal suffering wherever she found it. Or perhaps it was something more, a recognition of kindred spirits, separated by culture and circumstance, but united by the experience of being judged for differences rather than abilities. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah Mitchell had never been one to take the easy path when the right one lay clearly before her. And as she felt the slight weight of the girl leaning trustingly against her as fever began to take firmer hold, Sarah knew with certainty that bringing Morning Sky home was undoubtedly the right path, regardless of the difficulties it might bring. Sarah's cabin stood slightly apart from the main cluster of Pine Creek settlement, a deliberate choice that served her well as she approached with Morning Sky slumped against her. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as she guided Penny through the back path that led directly to her small stable, avoiding the main road where curious eyes might spot her unusual companion. "Almost there," Sarah murmured, though she wasn't. Certain Morning Sky could hear her. The girl's skin burned with fever, her slight frame trembling despite the warm autumn day. By the time they reached the cabin, Morning Sky was barely conscious, her eyes glazed and unfocused. With practiced efficiency, honed through years of medical emergencies, Sarah carried the girl inside and laid her gently on the small bed in the examining room adjacent to her living quarters. The fever had progressed rapidly, too rapidly for simple exhaustion and exposure. Sarah's experienced fingers found swollen lymph nodes beneath the girl's jaw, and when she examined Morning Sky's feet, she discovered the source, a deep cut on her right heel, now inflamed and seeping with infection. "No wonder you collapsed," Sarah said softly, already gathering supplies from her medicine cabinet. "You've been walking on this for days." The next hours passed in focused intensity as Sarah cleaned the wound, prepared willow bark tea for the fever, and applied a poultice of herbs she'd learned about from a Cheyenne woman who had once sought her help with a difficult childbirth. Morning Sky drifted between consciousness and delirium, occasionally trying to communicate with hand gestures that became increasingly frantic as the fever peaked. "Easy now," Sarah soothed, bathing the girl's forehead with cool water. "I understand. You're frightened, but you need to rest." As darkness fell, Sarah lit the oil lamps and settled into the chair beside the bed, medical journal in her lap, but her attention fixed on her patient. Outside, an owl called into the night, its haunting cry carrying across the settlement. The familiar sounds of Pine Creek preparing for sleep drifted through the partially open window, a distant piano from the church where Reverend Collins's wife taught evening lessons, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer making final repairs before closing, dogs barking as children were called inside. Sarah found herself wondering about Morning Sky's family. Were they searching for her? Did they regret whatever circumstances had driven this child to flee into the wilderness alone, or had they truly rejected her completely because she lacked a voice? The cruelty of such rejection seemed incomprehensible, yet Sarah had witnessed how fear of difference could transform even good people into something unrecognizable. Near midnight, Morning Sky's fever spiked dangerously. She thrashed against the bed covers, her hands moving in what seemed like desperate attempts to communicate. Sarah held her shoulders gently but firmly, speaking in calm, measured tones. "I'm here, Morning Sky. You're safe. The medicine will help, but you must fight this fever." Whether it was Sarah's voice or simply the crisis point of the infection, something changed in that moment. Morning Sky's eyes suddenly focused on Sarah's face with startling clarity. Her hand shot out to grip Sarah's wrist with surprising strength, then deliberately guided the doctor's fingers to the medicine pouch still hanging around her neck. "You want me to open this?" Sarah asked, uncertain. Morning Sky nodded weakly before slipping back into semi-consciousness. With careful fingers, Sarah untied the small leather pouch and emptied its contents into her palm. Several different dried plants, some she recognized immediately, and others unfamiliar to her, along with a small carved wooden figure of a bird in flight. The plants included dried elderberry, which Sarah herself used for fevers, but also 3 other specimens she'd never encountered in her medical studies or her exchanges with frontier herbalists. Trusting Morning Sky's apparent request, she took a small portion of each, crushed them together in a mortar, and steeped the mixture in hot water as she would any medicinal tea. "I hope I'm understanding you correctly," she whispered as she helped. "Morning Sky, drink the bitter liquid. I don't know what these plants are, but I trust you do." By dawn, the fever had broken. Morning Sky slept peacefully, her breathing deep and regular. The angry red inflammation around her injured foot noticeably reduced. Sarah, who had dozed fitfully in the chair beside the bed, awoke to find alert brown eyes studying her with that same intense gaze she'd noticed by the creek. "Good morning," Sarah smiled, professional satisfaction at her patient's improvement mixing with genuine relief. "You had me worried for a while there." Morning Sky's hands moved in those deliberate gestures Sarah now recognized as a language of sorts. Seeing the doctor's incomprehension, the girl pointed to the remnants of the herbal mixture, then touched her heart and inclined her head in a clear expression of thanks. "You're welcome, though I believe it was your medicine that saved you, not mine," Sarah replied honestly. "Those plants in your pouch, I've never seen some of them before. Did your people teach you about them?" A shadow crossed Morning Sky's face at the mention of her people, but she nodded, then mimed a woman gathering plants and teaching her to prepare them. "Your mother?" Sarah guessed. Another nod, followed by gestures indicating grinding, mixing and applying medicines to wounds and illnesses. "She was a healer," Sarah realized aloud, "and she taught you." The girl's expression brightened at being understood, a series of quick gestures following that Sarah struggled to interpret. "I wish I could understand your language properly," Sarah said, frustration evident in her voice. "Wait, perhaps—" She retrieved a slate and chalk she used for writing prescriptions and instructions for patients. Offering them to Morning Sky, she asked, "Can you write? Draw?" Morning Sky took the items hesitantly, examining the chalk with curiosity before beginning to draw on the slate. Her first attempts were simple: plants, people, basic activities. But as she gained confidence with the new medium, her drawings became more detailed and expressive. Through this improvised communication, Sarah began to understand more of Morning Sky's story. The girl drew her mother teaching her about plants, showing her how different leaves, roots and flowers could heal various ailments. She depicted herself watching carefully, learning not just what plants to use, but how to identify them by subtle characteristics that others missed. "You have a gift for healing," Sarah observed, as Morning Sky sketched a detailed drawing of a plant Sarah recognized as blue cohosh, used for women's complaints. "Your eyes see things others don't," Morning Sky nodded emphatically, adding to her drawing to show how she could identify plants from tiny details, the specific pattern of veins in a leaf, the exact arrangement of petals, minute differences in root structures that distinguished beneficial herbs from dangerous lookalikes. A knock at the door interrupted their exchange. Sarah glanced out the window to see Sheriff Taylor's tall frame on her porch, his expression serious beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Morning Sky followed her gaze, immediately tensing at the sight of the uniformed man. "Stay here," Sarah instructed, closing the door to the examining room before answering the front door. "Sheriff Taylor, what brings you by so early?" Taylor removed his hat, a gesture of respect that did little to soften his stern demeanor. "Morning, Doc. Ned Peterson was checking his trap lines at dawn and says he saw you riding in yesterday with what looked like an Indian child. Thought I'd better investigate." Sarah had expected this, though not quite so soon. News traveled with remarkable speed in small communities, especially news that disrupted the established order. "You're well informed." "Sheriff," she acknowledged, neither confirming nor denying. "Would you like coffee?" "This isn't a social call, Doc," Taylor replied, though he stepped inside when she gestured. "If you've got a native child here, we need to arrange return to the proper tribe before there's trouble. Relations with the Shoshone have been peaceful lately, but that can change quick if they think we're taking their children." Sarah poured coffee for them both, using the moment to organize her thoughts. The child came to me, James, not the other way around. I found her alone, injured and feverish by the East Creek. She'd have died without medical attention. Humanitarian of you, Taylor conceded, accepting the coffee cup. But doesn't change the facts. Can't have Indian children in the settlement. Not with memories of the Carson raid still fresh for some folks. She's a 12-year-old girl with an infected foot, not a war party, Sarah replied sharply, and she left her people voluntarily. They cast her out because she cannot speak. This information gave the sheriff pause. Mute, is she? Yes, and remarkably intelligent, despite her inability to speak conventionally. She communicates through gestures and drawings. Sarah leaned forward, sensing a potential opening in Taylor's rigid position. She has nowhere to go, James. Her own people rejected her due to superstition. Would you have me turn away a child in need? Sheriff Taylor sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. Your heart's always been bigger than your common sense, Sarah. The settlement council won't like this. Reverend Collins will have biblical objections. And the Wilsons lost a cousin to a Shoshone raid 10 years back. They'll raise hell. I'm not asking to adopt her permanently, Sarah countered, though the idea had already begun forming in her mind. Just to heal her properly and help her find her path. Surely Christian charity extends to all children regardless of their origins. The sheriff's weathered face revealed his internal conflict. Like many frontier lawmen, he balanced strict adherence to community expectations with a personal code that sometimes allowed for exceptions. Let me see the girl, he finally requested. Need to know what we're dealing with. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She's frightened, James. Please remember that. In the examining room, they found Morning Sky, sitting perfectly still on the edge of the bed, her back straight, chin lifted with a dignity that belied her youth and circumstances. Despite her fear, evident in her tightly clasped hands, she met the sheriff's gaze directly. Taylor studied her for a long moment before speaking. Young lady's got courage, I'll give her that. He turned to Sarah. 2 weeks, Doc. You can keep her here for 2 weeks while she heals. Then we need to find a proper solution. I'll smooth things with the council, but you keep her close to your property. No parading her through town or bringing her to church services. Last thing we need is panic over one small girl. Relief flooded through Sarah. 2 weeks wasn't much, but it was a starting point. Thank you, James. After the sheriff departed, Morning Sky's hands moved in questioning gestures, her expressive face seeking explanation. Sarah sat beside her, choosing her words carefully. That was Sheriff Taylor. He's concerned about your presence here. Some people in Pine Creek fear difference, just as some in your tribe did. Understanding flickered in the girl's dark eyes, a wisdom beyond her. Years evident in her expression. You can stay while your foot heals, Sarah continued. After that, she trailed off, uncertain how to explain complexities of frontier politics and prejudice to a child. Morning Sky surprised her by taking the slate again. This time, she drew 2 figures, clearly herself and Sarah, gathering plants together. Beside this, she sketched various healing scenes, preparing medicines, tending wounds, helping sick people. You want to stay and learn healing from me? Sarah asked, amazed at the clarity of the communication. Morning Sky nodded emphatically, adding another drawing of herself, pointing to plants, and Sarah observing. And teach me what you know as well? Sarah interpreted. The girl's smile was answer enough. It transformed her solemn features, revealing the child beneath the forced maturity of her circumstances. That evening, as Sarah prepared a simple supper for them both, she found herself contemplating the strange turn her orderly life had taken. The rational part of her mind listed all the complications this situation would inevitably bring. Community opposition, potential conflict with native tribes, the challenges of raising a child alone, particularly one who communicated so differently from others. Yet watching Morning Sky carefully setting the table, precisely mimicking Sarah's usual arrangement of dishes and utensils, she felt something she hadn't experienced since Thomas's death. A sense of rightness, of purpose extending beyond her medical practice into something more personally meaningful. "We'll take each day as it comes," she told Morning Sky as they shared cornbread and stew. "And we'll find a way for you to show everyone that a voice can take many forms beyond just spoken words." Morning Sky's answering gesture was simple, but eloquent. One hand over her heart, then extended towards Sarah. No words were necessary to understand its meaning. The 2 weeks Sheriff Taylor had granted passed with surprising swiftness. Morning Sky's infected foot healed rapidly under Sarah's care, and her strength returned in full measure. Yet the deadline loomed over them both, unspoken but ever present in their daily activities. During those 14 days, an extraordinary transformation occurred in Sarah's small cabin. What began as a temporary shelter for a displaced child evolved into a vibrant partnership that bridged vastly different worlds of knowledge. Each morning, Sarah attended to her regular patients, while Morning Sky observed quietly from a corner of the examining room, her keen eyes missing nothing of the doctor's techniques. In the afternoons, when medical duties permitted, they ventured into the forests and meadows surrounding Pine Creek. Here, Morning Sky came alive in ways that astonished Sarah. The previously solemn girl moved through the wilderness with natural grace, stopping frequently to indicate plants Sarah had walked past countless times without noticing. "I've lived here 5 years," Sarah remarked one particularly golden afternoon as they collected herbs in a hidden meadow well away from the settlement's usual paths. "And I never knew half these medicinal plants were right under my nose." Morning Sky smiled, her hands moving in the gesture language they were developing together, a hybrid of Shoshone signs, intuitive movements, and symbols they had created to represent specific medical concepts. Where speech failed, they had fashioned something new, a private communication that grew richer by the day. Sarah was a quick study, her physician's mind adept at categorizing and remembering. Still, she marveled at Morning Sky's ability to convey complex ideas without words. Through precise gestures, expressive facial movements, and occasionally supplemented by drawings on her slate, the girl could explain detailed processes for preparing medicines that rivaled written instructions in clarity. On this particular day, Morning Sky led Sarah to a patch of nondescript green plants nestled between fallen logs. To untrained eyes, they resembled common weeds. The girl knelt, carefully unearthing the roots with her small wooden digging tool. Her hands formed a series of now familiar gestures. Woman pain, moon time, stop bleeding too much. For women's monthly difficulties, Sarah clarified, examining the roots with newfound interest, and it helps regulate excessive bleeding. Morning Sky nodded emphatically, adding gestures indicating preparation methods: dry, grind, small amount in hot water. Sarah carefully wrapped the roots in clean cloth, adding them to her gathering basket. Margaret Wilson has been suffering terribly with her monthly cycles. I've tried everything in my medical books without much success. Perhaps your mother's. Knowledge succeeds where my formal education fails. The mention of her mother brought a fleeting sadness to Morning Sky's expressive face. She had gradually shared more of her story through drawings and gestures, how her mother had protected her from the tribe's growing suspicion, how her father, despite his position as chief, had been unable to overcome the prejudice against her. Silence, how the medicine woman had ultimately turned the tribe against her. "You miss them," Sarah observed gently. Morning Sky's hands moved. "Yes, but they fear what they don't understand." The sophistication of this sentiment, expressed through their developing sign language, struck Sarah deeply. This child comprehended human nature with clarity many adults never achieved, As they walked back toward the cabin, baskets full from their afternoon's work, Sarah broached the subject they had both been avoiding. "Sheriff Taylor will return tomorrow," she said carefully, watching Morning Sky's profile. "The 2 weeks he granted are up." The girl nodded, her stride never faltering, though her shoulders tensed slightly. "We need to decide what happens next," Sarah continued. "I've been thinking about this constantly." When they reached the cabin, Sarah set their gathered plants on the porch table and turned to face Morning Sky directly. "I want you to stay, if that's what you wish, not as a patient, but as my—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "As my apprentice, my student, and my teacher as well." Morning Sky's eyes widened, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. "It won't be easy," Sarah warned. "Some in Pine Creek will object. We'll need to be careful, respectful of local concerns, while standing firm in our conviction that you belong here." The girl's hands flew into rapid motion, an emotional series of gestures Sarah interpreted with growing skill. "Why would you want me? I bring trouble. No voice. Different. Because you have gifts that shouldn't be wasted," Sarah answered simply. "Your understanding of plants, your healing instincts, these are precious. And your difference isn't weakness, Morning Sky. It's merely a different path to the same destination." Morning Sky stood very still, absorbing these words. Then, with deliberate movements, she placed her hand over her heart, extended it toward Sarah, and finally brought both hands together in the gesture they had developed to mean agreement, partnership, shared purpose. "Then it's settled," Sarah smiled, relief and apprehension mingling in her chest. "Now we just need to convince Sheriff Taylor and the town council." When Sheriff Taylor arrived the following morning, he found Sarah and Morning Sky already prepared for his visit. The examining room had been arranged to showcase their work together, neatly labeled medicines, carefully organized herbs, and a series of drawings that Morning Sky had created illustrating the medicinal properties of local plants. "I see you've been busy," Taylor observed dryly, hat in hand as he surveyed the displays. "But our agreement was for 2 weeks of recovery, Doc, not setting up a permanent arrangement." "James," Sarah began, using the sheriff's first name deliberately. "Morning Sky has exceptional knowledge of medicinal plants that complement my formal training. She's already helped me improve treatments for several patients." "That may be," Taylor conceded, "but you know as well as I do that emotions in this settlement run high when it comes to natives. The Wilsons are already complaining about having her here, and Reverend Collins has concerns about a heathen influence." Morning Sky, who had been standing quietly beside Sarah, stepped forward unexpectedly. With calm dignity that belied her youth, she took the slate from the table and drew a simple church with a cross, then pointed to herself and made a gesture of prayer. "She's trying to tell you she's willing to learn Christian ways," Sarah interpreted, somewhat surprised by this initiative. "She doesn't want to disrupt the settlement's beliefs." Taylor studied the girl thoughtfully. "That's commendable, but it doesn't resolve the fundamental issue. Pine Creek isn't ready for this kind of integration." Sarah had anticipated this response. "What if we proceed gradually? Morning Sky stays with me, helping with my medical work, but initially remains somewhat separate from settlement activities. As people see her contributions to health and healing, as they benefit from her knowledge, acceptance will grow." "That's mighty optimistic, Doc," Taylor replied skeptically. "Perhaps," Sarah acknowledged, "but I believe in giving people the opportunity to overcome their prejudices when confronted with undeniable evidence." Morning Sky added her own argument, sketching quickly on her slate, first a simple drawing of a patient in pain, then various remedies being applied, and finally the patient recovering. She pointed to herself, then to the medicines they had prepared together. "She wants to help people," Sarah translated. "That's all, just as I do." Taylor sighed heavily, the sound of a man who recognized a losing battle. "The council meets tomorrow evening. You'll both need to present your case. I make no promises about the outcome. We'll be there," Sarah assured him. "Thank you, James." After the sheriff departed, Sarah turned to find Morning Sky watching her with an expression of mingled hope and fear. The girl's hands formed a question. "Will they send me away?" "Not if I can help it," Sarah replied firmly. "But we need to prepare carefully for tomorrow's council meeting. First impressions will matter greatly." The next day passed in meticulous preparation. Sarah selected Morning Sky's cleanest dress and added a collar of white linen from one of her own garments, creating a hybrid outfit that acknowledged the girl's heritage while incorporating elements familiar to the settlers. She brushed and braided Morning Sky's long black hair in a style less distinctively native, and spent hours coaching her on appropriate behavior for the council meeting. "Some will speak harshly," she warned. "When they do, remember to keep your expression calm. Don't show anger or fear. It will only reinforce their prejudices." Morning Sky nodded solemnly, rehearsing the respectful gestures they had practiced. The slight bow of acknowledgement, the attentive posture that conveyed listening without civility, the careful handling of her slate and chalk for communication. As sunset approached, Sarah felt her own nervousness growing. This meeting would determine not just Morning Sky's future, but potentially her own standing in the community she had worked so hard to serve. If the council ruled against them forcefully enough, her effectiveness as Pine Creek's only doctor might be compromised. "Are you ready?" she asked as they prepared to leave. Morning Sky's response was to reach for Sarah's hand, squeezing it once in reassurance. With a wisdom that continued to astonish, the child seemed to understand that she wasn't the only one at risk in this venture. Pine Creek's town hall was little more than a large cabin near the center of the settlement, used for council meetings, social gatherings, and occasionally as a makeshift courthouse. As Sarah and Morning Sky approached, they could see it was already crowded. Word had spread quickly about the unusual agenda item. Inside, the 5 council members sat at a table. At the front, Mayor Harrison, a former cavalry officer who'd established Pine Creek's first trading post. Reverend Collins, whose spiritual leadership carried significant weight. Martha Wilson, representing the settlement's women. Samuel Tucker, the wealthiest landowner in the area. And Sheriff Taylor, who served as both law enforcement and council secretary. The remaining space was filled with settlers, their expressions ranging from open curiosity to thinly veiled hostility. Sarah recognized all of them. She had delivered their babies, set their broken bones, treated their fevers and wounds. Whether that familiarity would work in her favor remained to be seen. "This special council meeting will come to order." "Mayor," Harrison announced, his military background evident in his commanding tone. "We're here to consider Dr. Mitchell's request regarding the native girl currently in her care." Sarah felt Morning Sky straighten beside her, the girl's chin lifting slightly as all eyes turned toward them. Despite her youth and silence, she projected a quiet dignity that even the most prejudiced observer might have difficulty dismissing entirely. "Dr. Mitchell," Harrison continued, "please state your petition to the council." Sarah rose, acutely aware that her next words might determine both their futures. "Members of the council, residents of Pine Creek," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I stand before you to request permission for Morning Sky, a young Shoshone girl, to remain under my care and protection as my medical apprentice." A murmur rippled through the gathered settlers. The very concept of a native child apprenticing to a white doctor, a female doctor at that, challenged multiple boundaries simultaneously. "Before you render judgment," Sarah continued, raising her voice slightly to overcome the whispers, "I ask that you consider 3 important facts. First, Morning Sky possesses exceptional knowledge of medicinal plants that has already improved my ability to treat our community's illnesses. Second, she has been rejected by her own people due to her inability to speak. She cannot return to them. And third, she has expressed willingness to adapt to our ways, including receiving Christian instruction. Reverend Collins leaned forward at this last point. The girl wishes for Christian teaching? She does, Sarah confirmed, gesturing for Morning Sky to show the drawing she had prepared, a simple but effective illustration of herself sitting in church, listening to the preacher. This strategic point scored a small victory, evident in the Reverend's thoughtful expression, but other objections quickly followed. How do we know she won't bring her tribe down on us? Demanded Peter Wilson, rising from his seat near the back. She could be a spy, sent to learn our weaknesses. She's a 12-year-old child who cannot speak, Sarah countered, struggling to keep frustration from her voice. Hardly an effective spy, and her tribe cast her out. They consider her presence bad medicine. As challenges and responses flew back and forth, Morning Sky remained perfectly still beside Sarah, her composure unbroken despite becoming the center of increasingly heated debate. Only when Martha Wilson directly questioned her intentions did the girl step forward, slate in hand. With careful, deliberate strokes, Morning Sky drew 3 simple images: a plant, a mortar and pestle, and a person rising from a sickbed. Below these, she added a 4th drawing, 2 hands clasped together, one clearly smaller than the other. She wants to use her knowledge to help heal, Sarah interpreted. She sees us working together, different but united in purpose. The simplicity and clarity of this message created a brief pause in the arguments. Even the most vocal opponents seemed momentarily silenced by the girl's direct communication. Mayor Harrison cleared his throat. While the council appreciates Dr. Mitchell's humanitarian concerns, we must consider the wider implications for our settlement. We will discuss this matter privately and render our decision. As the council members withdrew to the small adjacent room for deliberation, Sarah and Morning Sky waited, surrounded by the continuing murmurs of the settlers. The girl's hand found Sarah's again, a silent gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes without a single word. In that moment of uncertainty, with their future hanging in the balance, Sarah realized that regardless of the council's decision, Morning Sky had already transformed her understanding of communication, healing, and courage. Some lessons required no voice to teach, and some bonds needed no words to form. The council's deliberation stretched longer than anyone had anticipated. Through the small windows of the town hall, Sarah could see the sun dipping below the distant mountains, casting long shadows across Pine Creek's dusty main street. Inside, the assembled settlers grew restless, breaking into small conversational groups that cast occasional glances toward Sarah and Morning Sky, who remained seated quietly near the front. "They're taking their time," Martha Davis whispered, sliding onto the bench beside Sarah. Martha, whose difficult childbirth Sarah had managed the previous winter, had been one of the few to greet Morning Sky with genuine kindness. "That's a good sign, I think. Quick decisions usually mean minds were made up beforehand." Sarah nodded, grateful for the small encouragement. "Thank you for coming, Martha. Your support means a great deal." "That girl saved my Timothy's fever last week," Martha replied simply. "Don't think I've forgotten that your usual willow bark wasn't touching it until you tried that strange root mixture she showed you." This unexpected support from one of the settlement's respected mothers had been a pattern over the past 2 weeks. While some families openly opposed Morning Sky's presence, others had experienced direct benefits from the combined healing knowledge of doctor and apprentice. Timothy Davis's dangerous fever, little Emma Peterson's persistent cough, old Mr. Gardner's arthritic hands, all had improved dramatically with treatments incorporating Morning Sky's herbal knowledge. The council chamber door finally opened, And the 5 members filed back to their seats, their expressions carefully neutral. Mayor Harrison cleared his throat, instantly silencing the murmuring crowd. This council has carefully considered Dr. Mitchell's petition regarding the Shoshone girl, known as Morning Sky. He began formally. Our decision attempts to balance humanitarian concerns with the safety and stability of our settlement. Sarah felt Morning Sky's hand slip into hers beneath the folds of her skirt, the girl's fingers surprisingly steady compared to her own trembling ones. Therefore, we have determined the following, Harrison continued. The girl may remain under Dr. Mitchell's care and supervision for a trial period of 6 months, subject to specific conditions. A ripple of reaction moved through the crowd. Surprise from some, disapproval from others, cautious relief from Sarah herself. But the mayor wasn't finished. These conditions are non-negotiable, he emphasized, unfolding a paper. First, Dr. Mitchell assumes full responsibility for the girl's conduct and education, including regular Christian instruction from Reverend Collins. Second, the girl will not attend public gatherings, including church services, until deemed appropriate by this council. Third, she will assist only with Dr. Mitchell's medical practice, not interact independently with patients. Fourth, any sign of communication with other natives must be reported immediately to Sheriff Taylor. The conditions were restrictive, bordering on punitive, yet they offered a path forward, a starting point from which prejudices might eventually be overcome. Sarah stood, carefully controlling her expression to show gratitude rather than the frustration she felt at these limitations. The council is generous in its decision, she said diplomatically. We accept these conditions and will honor them fully. Morning Sky rose beside her, executing the perfect small bow they had practiced, her face showing appropriate humility while maintaining dignity. A delicate balance they had discussed at length in preparation for this moment. One final matter, Mayor Harrison added, his tone shifting slightly. To ensure the settlement's continued goodwill, Dr. Mitchell will provide medical services at half her usual rate for council members and their families during this trial period. This unexpected addition, leveraging Sarah's petition for their personal benefit, revealed the true dynamics at play. The council members would publicly support her unorthodox arrangement while privately profiting from it. Sarah swallowed her indignation, recognizing the calculated bargain being offered. As you wish, Mayor Harrison, she agreed, her professional smile firmly in place. The council's families will receive discounted care. As they left the town hall, reactions from the settlers ranged from cool nods to outright avoidance. The Wilson family made a point of crossing to the opposite side of the street rather than pass directly by them. Yet others, like Martha Davis and elderly Mr. Gardner, offered quiet words of support. You'll show them, Martha murmured as they passed. Just as you showed them, a woman could doctor better than half the men with fancy medical degrees. The walk home felt infinitely longer than the distance warranted, both Sarah and Morning Sky processing the implications of the council's decision. Only when they reached the safety of Sarah's cabin did Morning Sky's careful composure falter. Her hands moved in agitated gestures. They fear me still. Think I bring danger. They fear what they don't understand, Sarah replied, lighting the oil lamp against the gathering darkness. But we've won the most important battle. You can stay. The rest will come with time and demonstrated value. Morning Sky's gestures continued, more measured now. The conditions are unfair. You pay a high price for me. Sarah smiled, genuinely touched by the girl's concern for her. Half-price medical care is a small concession. Besides, I suspect they'll regret that condition when they discover just how many mysterious ailments council members and their families suddenly develop. This brought a flash of amusement to Morning Sky's expressive face, though it quickly faded as her hands formed a more serious question. What is Christian instruction? Sarah sat at the table, gesturing for Morning Sky to join her. Reverend Collins will teach you about the Christian God, the Bible, and religious practices important to the settlers. It doesn't mean you must abandon your people's spiritual beliefs. Many find wisdom in different traditions. But learning about Christianity will help the settlement accept you. Morning Sky considered this thoughtfully, then sketched a quick image on her slate, a figure standing between two worlds, feet planted in both. Yes, Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. It's possible to honor multiple sources of wisdom without betraying either. My father, who was also a doctor, often said that healing comes through many pathways to the same destination, relief of suffering. This principle became their guiding philosophy as autumn deepened toward winter. The prescribed 6-month trial period unfolded in careful, measured steps, each day bringing small victories and occasional setbacks in their shared goal of integration. Reverend Collins arrived 3 mornings each week to provide the mandated religious instruction. Initially stiff and formal, treating the task as duty rather than calling, he gradually found himself intrigued by Morning Sky's unique method of engagement with biblical concepts. Unable to recite verses or sing hymns, she instead drew interpretations of the stories he shared, the flood, the Exodus, the parables of Jesus, with a depth of understanding that sometimes startled him. She has a remarkable mind, he admitted to Sarah after a particularly productive session in late November. Her drawing of the Good Samaritan captured the essence of compassion more clearly than many written commentaries I've studied. She understands suffering and kindness on a fundamental level, Sarah replied. Experience has taught her what others learn only through words. These small shifts in perception accumulated gradually. When little Jenny Wilson developed a mysterious rash that resisted Sarah's conventional treatments, it was Martha Wilson herself, despite her husband's vocal opposition to Morning Sky, who secretly requested the native girl's assistance. "I don't care what Peter says," she whispered urgently at Sarah's door. "That child hasn't slept in 3 nights for itching. If your girl knows something that might help, I'll try it." The salve Morning Sky prepared, using a rare moss that grew only on the north side of certain pines, cleared Jenny's rash within 2 days. Martha's grudging gratitude didn't translate to public support, but her private attitude softened noticeably. She began leaving fresh bread or preserves on Sarah's porch, anonymous gifts that acknowledged debt while maintaining appearances. As winter settled over Pine Creek, bringing the isolation that heavy snows imposed on frontier settlements, Sarah's medical practice became increasingly essential. Accidents from woodcutting, winter fevers, chilblains, and the endless respiratory ailments that spread through close-quartered families during cold months kept her busier than ever. Morning Sky proved invaluable during this demanding period. While strictly observing the council's condition against independent patient interaction, she prepared medicines, organized supplies, and communicated with Sarah through their now fluent private language of gestures and expressions. Behind the closed doors of the examination room, many patients benefited from Morning Sky's knowledge without fully realizing it, accepting treatments prescribed by Dr. Mitchell that actually originated in Shoshone healing traditions. Yet, challenges remained. 3 months into their arrangement, a hunting party from a neighboring Shoshone band passed near Pine Creek, trading furs at Harrison's store before continuing north. Their brief presence sent ripples of tension through the settlement and created a crisis for Morning Sky herself. Sarah found her hiding in the root cellar, curled among the preserved vegetables and dried herbs, her thin frame shaking with emotion. Rather than cold, "What's happened?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside her. "Are you ill?" Morning Sky's hands trembled as she signed. "My uncle was with them, my father's brother. He did not see me, but I saw him. He would take me back." Understanding dawned. "You're afraid they'll force you to return if they discover you're here." The girl nodded vigorously, her eyes wide with genuine terror. "That won't happen," Sarah assured her firmly. "The council's agreement gives you legal protection within settlement boundaries, and I wouldn't allow anyone to take you against your will. Not your tribe, not the council, not anyone." The fierce protectiveness in Sarah's voice surprised them both. What had begun as humanitarian concern, then evolved into mutual respect and partnership, had transformed into something deeper, a bond that transcended conventional relationships. Between guardian and ward, teacher and student, or even adoptive parent and child, they had created something unique, a connection forged through shared purpose and complementary gifts. Morning Sky's responding gesture was equally revealing, hands forming the sign they had developed for family, followed by a questioning look. "Yes," Sarah answered without hesitation, "we are family now, though not by blood or legal document. Sometimes the strongest families are those we create through choice rather than circumstance." This declaration marked a turning point in their relationship. The careful, somewhat tentative nature of their early interactions gave way to the comfortable rhythms of genuine family life. Morning Sky gradually assumed responsibility for household tasks that freed Sarah to focus on her expanding medical practice. Sarah, in turn, dedicated evening hours to furthering Morning Sky's education, not just in medicine, but in reading, writing, mathematics, and history. The girl's intelligence blossomed with access to Sarah's small but carefully curated library. Unable to sound out words aloud, Morning Sky nevertheless developed remarkable reading comprehension, devouring books on botany, anatomy, and medical practice with insatiable curiosity. By January, she was maintaining detailed illustrated journals of their medicinal plants, creating reference materials that combined Shoshone knowledge with Western medical terminology, a bridge between worlds that existed nowhere else in the Wyoming Territory. As the 6-month trial period approached its halfway point, subtle changes became evident throughout Pine Creek. The Wilson family still crossed the street to avoid direct encounter. Reverend Collins remained officially cautious in public settings, and Sheriff Taylor maintained vigilant oversight of their compliance with the council's conditions. Yet beneath these official positions, a gradual undercurrent of acceptance was taking root, not yet strong enough to flourish openly, but present nonetheless in the increasing number of patients who asked specifically about those special herbs, or requested that unusual remedy that worked on the Davis boy. "We're making progress," Sarah observed one evening, as they sorted through dried plants by lamplight. "Slow as winter thaw, but progress nonetheless." Morning Sky's response revealed her growing sophistication with their sign language. "Some minds change only when healing is needed. Pain opens doors, fear keeps closed." Sarah smiled at the profound observation. "When did you become so wise in the ways of people?" The girl's answering expression held both amusement and wistfulness. When you have no voice, you learn to see what others miss. February arrived with a vengeance that even the oldest Pine Creek settlers could scarcely recall experiencing. Bitter. Winds howled down from the northern mountains, driving temperatures to punishing lows that froze water buckets solid inside homes and caused trees to crack like gunshots in the night. Snow piled in drifts taller than a man, effectively isolating the settlement from the outside world. Such extreme conditions inevitably brought crisis. Food stores dwindled faster than anticipated. Hunting parties returned empty-handed or didn't return at all, forcing search expeditions that further taxed limited resources. Firewood became precious currency as families struggled to maintain enough heat to prevent frostbite and hypothermia. For Sarah and Morning Sky, the brutal winter brought opportunity disguised as hardship. The desperate circumstances created medical emergencies that required all their combined knowledge and occasionally forced the settlement to overlook the council's restrictions on Morning Sky's activities. The turning point came in the third week of February, when a massive blizzard descended without warning, lasting 3 relentless days. As it finally subsided, Sheriff Taylor arrived at Sarah's cabin before dawn, his face grim beneath layers of frost-covered scarves. "Peterson family's in trouble," he announced without preamble when Sarah opened the door. "All 4 children down, with fever. James Peterson went out for more firewood yesterday morning and hasn't returned. Martha's alone with the sick children and nearly out of wood herself." Sarah was already reaching for her medical bag. "Influenza?" "Looks that way," Taylor confirmed. "Same symptoms as the Davis family last week, but 4 children at once, with no help." He didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone knew influenza could claim young lives quickly, particularly in weakened conditions. "I'll need Morning Sky," Sarah stated firmly, brooking no argument. "The children will need the fever remedy we prepared together. It's been more effective than anything in my medical texts." Taylor glanced toward the back room where Morning Sky slept, his expression conflicted. "Council said no direct patient contact. And I say, 4 children might die without her assistance," Sarah countered, her voice steely with resolve. "You can report me to the council afterward if you wish, Sheriff, but right now those children need every healing skill available." After a moment's hesitation, Taylor nodded curtly. "Bring her. I'll deal with the council if necessary." Morning Sky was already awake and preparing, having heard the conversation. She moved with focused efficiency, gathering specific dried herbs from their carefully organized shelves, adding them to a small leather pouch, and pulling on the warmer clothing Sarah had sewn for her during the autumn months. The journey to the Peterson homestead, normally a 15-minute walk, took nearly an hour through chest-deep snowdrifts. They arrived to find conditions even worse than Taylor had described. Martha Peterson, herself fevered and weak, knelt beside the family's last few pieces of firewood, struggling to maintain a flame in the stone fireplace. Her 4 children, ages 2 through 8, lay bundled together on a single bed, their flushed faces and labored breathing testament to the severity of their condition. Sarah assessed the situation with a physician's trained eye and immediately established priorities. "Sheriff, you need to locate James Peterson or bring emergency firewood from elsewhere. These children will freeze before the fever can take them if we don't maintain heat." While Taylor departed on this mission, Sarah and Morning Sky worked in seamless coordination honed through months of partnership. Sarah examined each child, documenting symptoms and progression, while Morning Sky prepared the special fever remedy, a tea made from a combination of willow bark, elderberry, and 3 other plants from her Shoshone pharmacopoeia. "My babies," Martha Peterson murmured, swaying slightly with her own fever. We'll do everything possible," Sarah assured her, guiding the exhausted mother to a chair. "You need treatment as well. The children need you strong." For the next hours, Sarah and Morning Sky worked without rest. They administered medicines, applied cool compresses to burning foreheads, and carefully monitored each child's response. When the youngest began struggling to breathe, Morning Sky indicated through urgent gestures that a steam treatment with specific herbs might help. Martha Peterson, watching through fever-glazed eyes as the native girl tenderly lifted her youngest, Sun to benefit from the medicated steam, found her perception shifting. This was not the dangerous Indian she had been warned about, but a child herself, showing remarkable gentleness and skill with her children. "How did you learn such things?" she asked weakly, as Morning Sky encouraged the toddler to breathe the aromatic vapors. Morning Sky looked to Sarah, who interpreted the question and explained her mother was a healer among the Shoshone. She taught Morning Sky from earliest childhood to recognize medicinal plants and understand their applications. Martha nodded slowly, a new respect dawning in her expression. "My mother taught me to make quilts the same way, watching, then doing, over and over until my hands knew the patterns without thinking." This simple acknowledgement of shared human experience, the universal method of passing knowledge from mother to child across cultures, created a bridge of understanding that transcended words. Morning Sky offered a small smile, then made a gesture Sarah recognized immediately. "She says your children have your strength. They're fighting hard." By midday, Sheriff Taylor returned with 3 men hauling emergency firewood and the grim news that search parties had found James Peterson's body. He had apparently become disoriented in the blizzard and succumbed to exposure less than half, a mile from his home. The tragedy cast a pall over the already desperate situation, but there was no time for proper mourning. Survival demanded full attention. Sarah made the difficult decision to withhold this news from Martha until the children showed improvement. The mother's emotional collapse could doom the fragile progress they were making with the sick children. With quiet efficiency, she instructed the men to maintain the fire and return to town for additional supplies, she specified. As darkness fell, the Peterson cabin became the focal point of the settlement's collective concern. Families who had previously shunned Morning Sky's presence now sent whatever they could spare, blankets, food, medicines, carried by grim-faced men who acknowledged the native girl with uncomfortable nods as they delivered their offerings. Through the longest night of her medical career, Sarah fought alongside Morning Sky for the lives of 4 children who now faced the world without a father. By dawn, the turning point arrived. The 2 oldest children's fevers broke decisively, while the younger ones showed slight improvement. Morning Sky's persistent steam treatments had eased the toddler's breathing to the point where Sarah no longer feared imminent respiratory failure. When Martha Peterson finally learned of her husband's death later that morning, her grief was tempered by the knowledge that her children would survive. "James would say that's what matters most," she whispered, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks. "He went out to save them, and in a way he did. He brought help." The crisis at the Peterson homestead marked a profound shift in Pine Creek's perception of Morning Sky. News of her tireless work alongside Sarah spread throughout the settlement, embellished with each retelling until the narrative transformed into something approaching legend. How the mute Indian girl had worked through 2 days and nights without rest. How she knew healing secrets no white doctor could match. How she had shown particular tenderness with the youngest Peterson child when hope seemed lost. When Sarah and Morning Sky finally returned to their cabin after ensuring the Peterson family had adequate support, they found their porch piled with unexpected gifts. Fresh bread, preserved fruits, a hand-carved wooden box, even a small handmade quilt clearly crafted for Morning Sky's bed. Each item represented a tacit acknowledgement that the settlement's assessment had been wrong, that value could be found where they had expected only threat. Exhausted beyond words, Sarah sank into her chair by the fire. "You've proven yourself to them in the most effective way possible," she told Morning Sky. "Not through arguments or demands for acceptance, but through service and genuine care." Morning Sky's responding gestures were thoughtful. They see only what they needed to see. The children needed help. I could help. Simple. Not simple at all, Sarah countered. What you've done required extraordinary courage. to help people who feared and rejected you, to use your gifts without resentment toward those who doubted them. The girl's next signs revealed her growing wisdom. Fear makes walls. Healing opens doors. My mother taught this. In the weeks following the Peterson crisis, the Council's restrictive conditions became increasingly irrelevant in practice, even as they remained officially in force. Morning Sky began receiving direct requests for her herbal remedies delivered through Sarah, but with specific acknowledgement of whose knowledge was being sought. Reverend Collins, impressed by both her healing work and her continued engagement with religious instruction, suggested she might begin attending Sunday services, to observe only, of course, a significant concession that offered public legitimacy to her presence. Even the Wilson family, long the most vocal opponents of Morning Sky's residence in Pine Creek, softened their stance when their prized milk cow developed a mysterious ailment that threatened both the animal's life and the family's livelihood. Peter Wilson's pride nearly cost him the cow before his wife intervened, sending their oldest son to request Sarah and Morning Sky's assistance under cover of darkness. The mixture Morning Sky prepared, a poultice of specific plants applied directly to the cow's swollen udder, resolved the potentially fatal infection within 2 days. Wilson never publicly acknowledged this debt, but thereafter remained conspicuously silent when Morning Sky's name arose in community discussions. As March slowly mellowed winter's harsh grip, Sarah observed a remarkable transformation within. Morning Sky herself, the initially solemn, wary girl, had blossomed into a more confident young person who carried herself with quiet dignity. Her communication skills had expanded dramatically, not just the sophisticated sign language she and Sarah had developed, but also written expression that demonstrated increasingly elegant penmanship and vocabulary. Most striking was her artistic development. What had begun as simple drawings to bridge communication gaps evolved into detailed botanical illustrations that combined scientific accuracy with aesthetic beauty. She had begun creating a comprehensive medicinal plant guide specific to the region, documenting growth patterns, identifying characteristics, harvesting techniques, and preparation methods with meticulous precision. "This should be published," Sarah remarked one evening, turning pages of Morning Sky's latest work with genuine admiration. "There's nothing like it anywhere. Certainly nothing that combines traditional native knowledge with Western scientific classification." Morning Sky considered this suggestion thoughtfully before responding with signs that reflected her deepening understanding of both cultures. Two worlds of healing, separate for too long. Better together, like us. Like us, Sarah agreed, unexpected emotion tightening her throat as she recognized the profound truth in this simple observation. Their partnership had indeed brought together complementary strengths, creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. As the 6-month trial period approached its conclusion, the question of Morning Sky's permanent status in Pine Creek loomed larger in both their minds. The council would soon revisit their arrangement, evaluating whether conditions had been satisfied and determining what came next. While practical evidence strongly favored a positive assessment, frontier settlements operated on complex social calculations beyond mere utility. "Whatever they decide," Sarah said as they prepared for sleep the night before the scheduled council meeting, "remember that you've earned your place here through your own gifts and efforts. No decision can change that truth." Morning Sky's response revealed how far she had come from the frightened girl Sarah had found by the creek. Fear speaks loudly, truth speaks longer. With this wisdom as their foundation, they faced the council's judgment not with anxiety, but with the quiet confidence of those who had already proven their worth in ways that transcended official validation. The council meeting to determine Morning Sky's future was scheduled for the first Tuesday in April, coinciding with the arrival of spring thaw. As the appointed day approached, Sarah found herself simultaneously preparing arguments to present formally and attending to a sudden surge in medical calls, as if the settlement had collectively decided to develop ailments requiring mourning. Sky's particular skills just before her status was to be decided. "It's not coincidence," Sarah noted with wry amusement as they returned from treating Mrs. Tucker's unbearable joint pain with one of Morning Sky's specialized poultices. "They're creating a record of your value before the council votes." Morning Sky's responding gesture indicated skepticism, but Sarah shook her head firmly. "Don't underestimate the politics of frontier survival. Even those who won't publicly support you are quietly acknowledging your contributions. They want you to stay. They just want to save face while allowing it." The morning of the council meeting dawned clear and mild, the snow retreating to shadowed pockets beneath trees and along north-facing hillsides. Sarah and Morning Sky had prepared meticulously, organizing documentation of specific cases where Morning Sky's knowledge had proven decisive, collecting written statements from those willing to provide them, and assembling a presentation of a developing medicinal plant guide to demonstrate her ongoing contributions to community knowledge. As they walked toward the town hall, Sarah was surprised to see unusually large numbers of settlers already gathered. Typically, council meetings attracted only those directly affected by the agenda items, but today it appeared nearly every Pine Creek family was represented. "Quite a turnout," Sheriff Taylor commented as he met them outside the building. His expression revealed nothing of the council's preliminary discussions, but the slight relaxation around his eyes gave Sarah cautious optimism. "Mayor Harrison wants to speak with you privately before the public session, Doc." This unexpected request sent a ripple of concern through Sarah. Private conversations before public decisions often indicated complicated political maneuvering. She squeezed Morning Sky's hand reassuringly before following Taylor to the small side room where Mayor Harrison waited. The former cavalry officer stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back in military posture. He turned as Sarah entered, his weathered face serious but not hostile. "Dr. Mitchell," he acknowledged with a nod, "I wanted to inform you of certain developments before the public meeting begins." Developments? Sarah's physician's training kept her voice steady despite her internal alarm. "We received a communication 3 days ago from Fort Laramie," Harrison explained. "A Shoshone hunting party reported to the Indian agent there that a girl from their tribe has been living among white settlers in this region. They've formally requested her return." The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. All their careful preparation for the council's assessment suddenly seemed irrelevant against this new threat. "Morning Sky left her tribe because they rejected her," she responded, fighting to maintain composure. "They considered her silence a curse, a bad omen. Returning her would subject her to cruelty, perhaps even danger." Harrison raised a hand to forestall further argument. "I'm aware of the circumstances, as you've reported them, but this creates a diplomatic situation beyond Pine Creek's jurisdiction. The tribal leaders now claim they wish her return for proper care among her own people." "After casting her out?" Sarah couldn't keep the bitter edge from her voice. "What's changed, Mayor Harrison? Why would they want her back now?" The mayor hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. The Indian agent's letter mentioned rumors circulating among various tribes about a Shoshone girl with extraordinary healing abilities living with a white doctor. Apparently, Morning Sky's reputation has spread beyond our settlement. Understanding dawned with cold clarity. They didn't value her until others did. Now that her skills are recognized, they want to reclaim what they discarded. "That's not for me to judge," Harrison replied diplomatically. "But it creates a complicated situation for our council. Refusing to return a native child to her tribe could damage relations that have been relatively peaceful. Yet we also recognize the girls' contributions to Pine Creek's welfare during an exceptionally difficult winter. Sarah studied Harrison's face, reading between carefully chosen words. The council has already discussed this, hasn't it? You've decided something without hearing our presentation. We've considered options, Harrison admitted. I wanted to prepare you privately because I respect your work here, Dr. Mitchell. Whatever the council decides today, I didn't want you blindsided in public. The warning was both courtesy and strategy, allowing Sarah time to compose herself rather than react emotionally in front of the gathered settlement. She nodded tersely, professional dignity masking the fear churning beneath. Thank you for the information, Mayor. Morning Sky and I look forward to presenting our case to the full council. When Sarah rejoined Morning Sky in the main hall, the girl immediately sensed something was wrong. Her questioning gestures were precise. Bad news. There was no time for a full explanation as the council members took their positions at the front table. Sarah managed only a brief whispered summary. Your tribe has asked for your return before the proceedings formally began. Morning Sky went absolutely still, her face draining of color as the implications registered. Her hand found Sarah's, in a grip that conveyed both fear and resolve. Mayor Harrison called the meeting to order with practiced authority. Citizens of Pine Creek, we gather today to evaluate the status of the Shoshone girl known as Morning Sky, who has resided with Dr. Sarah Mitchell for the past 6 months under conditions established by this council. The formal phrasing set the tone for what followed, a carefully orchestrated review of the original conditions, testimony from selected settlers regarding Morning Sky's conduct and contributions, and finally, the revelation to the gathered community about the tribe's request for her return. This announcement sent a ripple of reaction through the hall. Sarah felt Morning Sky's hand trembling in hers, though the girl's expression remained remarkably composed, a hard-won dignity that had become her hallmark in the face of judgment. Before this council renders any decision, Harrison continued, we will hear from those most directly involved. Dr. Mitchell, please present your statement regarding Morning Sky's continued residence in Pine Creek. Sarah rose, drawing on every ounce of professional poise cultivated through years of proving herself in male-dominated medical spaces. Honored council members, citizens of Pine Creek, she began, her clear voice carrying to the rafters. 6 months ago, you granted conditional permission for Morning Sky to remain under my care and instruction. Today, I stand before you not merely as her guardian, but as her student as well. This unexpected framing caught attention immediately. Sarah proceeded to outline specifically how Morning Sky's knowledge had complemented her formal medical training, creating treatments more effective than either tradition could provide alone. She detailed cases where lives had been saved, suffering eased, or recovery accelerated through their combined approach, particularly during the brutal winter emergencies. The Peterson family's survival through influenza, Martha Wilson's difficult childbirth, Mr. Gardner's formerly crippling joint pain, these and dozens more cases demonstrate the practical value Morning Sky brings to our community, Sarah stated firmly. But beyond these measurable benefits lies a more profound truth. This young woman represents an opportunity for genuine understanding between different traditions of knowledge. Sarah then called forward Martha Peterson, who rose with quiet dignity, her youngest child in her arms. My 4 children are alive today because Dr. Mitchell and Morning Sky worked without rest during the darkest hours of winter, she testified simply. After losing my husband to the blizzard, I might have lost my entire family had Morning Sky not been here with her healing skills. Whatever she once was to her tribe, she is now a blessing to Pine Creek. Other testimonials followed, more than Sarah had anticipated, including several from families who had previously expressed skepticism or outright opposition. Even Peter Wilson, though he didn't speak personally, allowed his wife to describe how their prized cow had been saved by Morning Sky's treatment. Throughout these statements, Morning Sky sat perfectly still, her expressive eyes the only indication of her emotional response to this unexpected support. When finally invited to address the council herself, she rose with the graceful composure that had gradually replaced her initial wariness. Using the slate she now carried everywhere, Morning Sky wrote a simple message in her increasingly elegant handwriting. I was born without voice but not without purpose. My place is where healing is needed and valued. The straightforward dignity of this statement created a moment of profound silence throughout the hall. Even those who remained uncomfortable with her presence couldn't deny the truth embodied in those carefully formed words. Mayor Harrison cleared his throat, visibly moved despite his efforts at official detachment. The council will now, before he could announce their deliberation, the town hall door swung open with dramatic timing. Sheriff Taylor stepped aside as three figures entered. Two men in traditional Shoshone dress flanked a woman whose bearing commanded immediate attention despite her advanced age. Her face, deeply lined by weather and years, carried unmistakable authority. The intricate beadwork on her clothing and the medicine pouch at her waist identified her as a person of significant standing. A collective gasp moved through the gathered settlers. Morning Sky's reaction was even more dramatic. Her slate clattered to the floor as her hands flew to her mouth in a gesture of shock and recognition. This is Medicine Woman from the Eastern Shoshone Band, Sheriff Taylor announced unnecessarily. The woman's status was evident in her very presence. She has traveled with these warriors to address the council regarding Morning Sky. Sarah instinctively moved closer to Morning Sky, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the new arrivals. Medicine Woman's dark eyes, still sharp despite her years, assessed this relationship with keen discernment before she spoke. Through one of the warriors who knew rudimentary English, Medicine Woman delivered her message to the hushed room. The silent one who walks between worlds was seen in visions. The spirits speak now of change coming to all peoples. She must return to show new path. The translation, though somewhat stilted, conveyed unmistakable meaning. The Shoshone were not merely requesting Morning Sky's return, they were claiming her as a prophesied figure whose significance extended beyond Pine Creek's immediate concerns. Morning Sky's reaction surprised everyone. Rather than displaying fear at the prospect of returning to those who had rejected her, she stepped forward with quiet confidence. Using gestures that the Shoshone visitors clearly understood, she communicated directly with Medicine Woman in a rapid exchange that excluded even Sarah from full comprehension. The elderly woman's weathered face registered several emotions in quick succession: surprise, evaluation, and finally a reluctant respect. She responded with her own gestures, creating a silent dialogue that held the entire town hall in fascinated attention. When they finished, Morning Sky retrieved her slate and wrote a message that she held up for all to see. I was cast out for silence. Now they wish my return because others value what they rejected. I choose my own path now. Medicine Woman, observing this written communication with evident interest, spoke again through her translator. The Silent One has found new medicine. This was foretold. She stands between worlds with power in both. The cryptic statement created confusion among the settlers, but Sarah began to understand the complex dynamics unfolding. Morning Sky's skills, developed and refined during her time in Pine Creek, had transformed her status from rejected child to valued healer. The tribes, hearing rumors of her abilities, now sought to reclaim what they had discarded, perhaps genuinely recognizing her worth. perhaps merely unwilling to allow her gifts to benefit settlers exclusively. Mayor Harrison, visibly uncomfortable with this unexpected diplomatic complexity, attempted to reassert control over the proceedings. This council must consider both the settlement's interests and proper relations with the Shoshone people. Perhaps a compromise. Morning Sky's slate interrupted his careful political maneuvering. I belong to neither world completely. I must serve both. The simplicity and wisdom of this declaration silenced both council members and tribal representatives. In those few words, Morning Sky had articulated what no adult in the room had fully grasped, that the choice before them was not between competing claims of ownership, but between restriction and possibility. With deliberate movements, she wrote again, I will continue learning healing from Dr. Mitchell. I will share knowledge with my people when needed, not owned by either. Respected by both, Medicine Woman, watching these words form on the slate, nodded slowly, an acknowledgement that transcended language barriers. Through her translator, she offered what no one had expected. The Silent One speaks with wisdom beyond her years. Let her walk between worlds as the spirits have shown. We will not force her return. The tension that had gripped the town hall began to dissipate, replaced by murmurs of relieved discussion. Mayor Harrison exchanged glances with the other council members, a silent consultation that acknowledged the elegance of the solution Morning Sky herself had proposed. This council believes a formal arrangement benefiting both communities might be reached, he announced carefully. Morning Sky would continue residence with Dr. Mitchell while serving as a liaison of healing knowledge between our peoples. For the first time that day, a smile transformed Morning Sky's solemn features. She had achieved what neither side had envisioned, not merely permission to exist within restrictive boundaries, but recognition of her unique position to bridge worlds that had remained separate far too long. As the formal proceedings concluded, with details to be determined through further discussion, Sarah found herself marveling at the extraordinary young woman beside her. Morning Sky had arrived at her door less than a year earlier as a rejected, vulnerable child. Now she stood as a catalyst for understanding between communities long divided by fear and prejudice. The voice Morning Sky had found required no sound. To carry profound truth, only the courage to forge a path where none had existed before. 2 years passed since that pivotal council meeting where Morning Sky had charted her own course between two worlds. Spring painted the Wyoming wilderness with vibrant colors once again, transforming the landscape from winter's austere beauty to a canvas of wildflowers and emerging greenery. The banks of Pine Creek, which had given the settlement its name, burst with medicinal plants that two figures harvested with practiced precision. Sarah Mitchell, now approaching her 35th year, worked alongside Morning Sky, who at 15 had grown tall and graceful, her childhood features maturing into a striking young woman whose presence commanded respect throughout the region. Their baskets filled quickly with specific plants needed to replenish their expanding medicine stores. I think we have enough, Golden Seal, Sarah observed, straightening to ease her back, though we should check the North Ridge for more echinacea. Before heading back, the Miller twins will need another treatment for their coughs. Morning Sky nodded, her hands forming fluid gestures that Sarah now understood as easily as spoken words. The purple coneflower grows stronger on rocky soil. Better medicine there. Their communication had evolved into something remarkable, a language that combined Shoshone signs, conventional gestures, and unique symbols they had developed together. So intuitive had their exchanges become that Sarah often forgot Morning Sky couldn't speak, while visitors were frequently astonished to discover the girl's silence only after spending considerable time in her company. The transformation of Pine Creek itself was equally remarkable. What had begun as a tentative arrangement allowing Morning Sky to remain under Sarah's care had blossomed into an unprecedented collaboration between the settlement and the Eastern Shoshone Band. Quarterly healing councils brought together practitioners from both traditions, with Morning Sky serving as the central bridge. During these gatherings, Medicine Woman, who had originally come to reclaim the girl, but instead recognized the path the spirits had truly intended, would arrive. With selected tribal healers, they would share knowledge of plants, preparation methods, and treatments with Sarah and interested settlers, while Sarah contributed Western medical techniques that complemented traditional approaches. Morning Sky facilitated these exchanges through her unique position between worlds, translating not just between languages, but between fundamentally different ways of understanding health, illness, and healing. Her illustrated guides, combining precise botanical drawings with dual explanations from both traditions, had become treasured resources that several settlers had paid to have properly bound and preserved. Mr. Harrison mentioned visitors arriving. "And tomorrow," Sarah commented as they made their way toward the North Ridge. "Apparently a doctor from Denver read about our collaborative approach in that newspaper article last fall. He's bringing 2 medical colleagues to observe our methods." Morning Sky's expression revealed mild amusement. "More doctors who doubt until they see." "Likely so," Sarah acknowledged with a smile. "But each one who comes away convinced helps spread these ideas further. That Philadelphia Medical Journal publishing your illustrated guide to regional medicinal plants has already changed minds that might never have been reached otherwise." The publication had been a significant milestone. Though credited jointly to Dr. Sarah Mitchell and Morning Sky, Shoshone, the majority of the content had come directly from Morning Sky's meticulous documentation. When the journal's editor initially balked at including a mute Indian girl as co-author, Sarah had firmly withdrawn the submission until proper attribution was granted. The resulting publication had attracted attention throughout medical circles in the East, with several universities requesting additional information about their collaborative methods. As they crested the ridge, Morning Sky suddenly raised her hand in the signal for silence and attention. Her keen eyes had spotted something moving in the valley below, a small group of riders approaching Pine Creek from the Western Trail. Even at this distance, their identity was unmistakable to both. "Women," my father, Morning Sky, signed, her expression complex with emotions. "With council elders." This was unexpected. Though relations between the settlement and tribe had improved dramatically, visits from Chief Running Elk himself remained rare. The tribal leader had met with his daughter on only 3 occasions since she had established her new life in Pine Creek, each interaction marked by a formal dignity that masked deeper feelings neither fully expressed. "We should return to town," Sarah suggested, respecting the significance of this unexpected visit. "They'll likely head to Mayor Harrison's office first." By the time they reached the settlement, news of the Shoshone delegation's arrival had already spread. Mayor Harrison, Sheriff Taylor, and Reverend Collins stood outside the town hall in their best attire, prepared to receive the tribal representatives with appropriate ceremony. The evolution of Pine Creek's attitude toward their native neighbors represented perhaps the most profound aspect of Morning Sky's influence, a shift from fear and suspicion to cautious respect and pragmatic cooperation. Morning Sky hesitated briefly at the edge of the gathering crowd, her hands forming a question for Sarah alone. "Ready?" The simple query encompassed much deeper meaning. Each encounter with her father reopened complex emotions about her childhood rejection and the painful circumstances of her departure from the tribe. Though her position as a bridge between communities had been formally established, the personal wounds had healed more slowly. "I'm right beside you," Sarah assured her, the bond between them having long transcended conventional definitions of teacher-student or even adoptive family. They had become something unique, partners in a shared mission that benefited both their communities. Chief Running Elk dismounted with the fluid grace that Morning Sky had inherited, his face grave beneath the ceremonial headdress that marked this as an official visit rather than a personal one. His eyes found his daughter immediately, a flicker of emotion quickly masked by the stoic expression expected of a tribal leader. The formal greetings between the chief and town officials followed. Established protocol, with careful acknowledgement of the improved relations between their peoples. Only after these ceremonial exchanges did Running Elk approach Morning Sky and Sarah, who had remained slightly apart from the official welcoming party. "My daughter," he acknowledged, speaking in English for the benefit of the settlers present. "Your mother sends her prayers." Morning Sky inclined her head respectfully, her hands forming the signs of formal greeting appropriate for a tribal chief. The deliberate formality of this exchange concealed the complicated history between them, presenting to all observers the image of proper respect rather than the painful reality of her earlier rejection. "Chief Running Elk," Sarah greeted him with equal formality. "Your daughter brings honor to both her peoples through her healing work." Something shifted in the chief's expression at these words, a subtle relaxation of the rigid dignity he maintained in public settings. "This is why we have come," he responded, gesturing toward the elders who accompanied him. "Our council has reached a decision that concerns Morning Sky." A ripple of tension moved through the gathered settlers. Despite 2 years of improving relations, ancestral suspicions ran deep. Any decision by the tribal council regarding Morning Sky inevitably raised concerns about attempts to reclaim her. Mayor Harrison stepped forward diplomatically. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in the town hall, Chief Running Elk. We can offer refreshments after your journey." Once assembled in the more private setting of the town hall, with only key representatives from both communities present, Running Elk revealed the purpose of their visit. Through measured words and occasional translation assistance from one of the younger warriors, he explained that the tribal council had created a new position, one without precedent in their history. "Our people have suffered because medicine of the white man and medicine of the Shoshone remained separate," he stated. "Many die who might live if these two paths joined." The council names Morning Sky as keeper of two medicines, one who holds knowledge of both worlds and teaches how they may work together. The significance of this announcement rendered the room momentarily silent. For a tribe to create an entirely new ceremonial position represented extraordinary adaptation to changing circumstances, an acknowledgement that survival required evolution rather than rigid adherence to tradition. Morning Sky's expression revealed her astonishment. She had expected neither this recognition nor the implicit apology it contained for her earlier rejection. Her hands formed a question directed to her father. "The medicine woman agrees to this." Running Elk's weathered face softened slightly. "Medicine woman had a vision of you standing between our people and the settlers, holding healing plants in both hands. She says the spirits showed her that your silence was not a curse but a gift. It forced you to see what others cannot when they are too busy speaking." This revelation, that the very person who had led the campaign for Morning Sky's expulsion now advocated for her special recognition, created a profound moment of healing that transcended official declarations. The wound at the core of Morning Sky's identity, the rejection by her people because of her difference, had finally closed. What exactly would this position entail? Sarah asked, practical considerations emerging once the emotional impact had been absorbed. Morning Sky would continue living here, Running Elk explained, but would visit our winter and summer camps to teach our healers what she has learned of white medicine. She would bring selected tribal healers to learn from you and lead the sharing of knowledge between our peoples. The proposal represented a formalization and expansion of the role Morning Sky had already naturally assumed. Rather than requiring her to choose between worlds, it acknowledged her unique ability to belong to both simultaneously, not as a compromise, but as a position of honor. Mayor Harrison exchanged glances with Reverend Collins and the other settlement representatives. This arrangement would benefit Pine Creek as well. Morning Sky's work with Dr. Mitchell has improved health throughout our community. For the first time since the meeting began, all eyes turned expectantly to Morning Sky herself. Though others had spoken about her, the decision remained hers alone. The scared child who had fled rejection had grown into a young woman, with the power to define her own place in a changing frontier world. She rose with quiet dignity, the slate she once relied upon for communication now used primarily for her detailed medicinal drawings rather than daily expression. With clear, deliberate gestures, she addressed both her father and the settlement representatives. I accept this path, not because either council names it, but because it is the work I am meant to do. My voice needs no sound to speak healing between our peoples. As spring sunshine streamed through the town hall windows, illuminating dust motes in golden light, Sarah watched Morning Sky with profound pride. The frightened, injured girl she had discovered by the creek had transformed into a bridge between divided worlds, her very silence becoming the source of her greatest strength. In a frontier marked by conflict and misunderstanding, Morning Sky had created something revolutionary, a space where different traditions of knowledge could complement rather than compete with each other. Her inability to speak had forced those around her to listen more deeply, to look beyond words to the essential wisdom each tradition contained. That evening, as they sat on the porch of the cabin they still shared, Sarah and Morning Sky watched. The sunset paint the western sky in breathtaking colors. The Shoshone delegation had departed with plans for Morning Sky's first official visit to the tribal summer camp, while the settlement council had enthusiastically endorsed the arrangement that promised continued benefits for Pine Creek. I've been thinking, Sarah said, breaking their comfortable silence. The doctor from Denver arriving tomorrow has connections to a publisher interested in comprehensive medical texts. Your illustrated guides deserve wider distribution, perhaps a complete volume combining both healing traditions. Morning Sky considered this suggestion, her hands moving in the expressive language they had crafted together. Words on paper travel where we cannot. Seeds of understanding planted far beyond Wyoming. Exactly, Sarah agreed. What began here shouldn't remain isolated. Other communities, both settlements and tribes, could benefit from this approach. As darkness gradually claimed the landscape, Morning Sky's hands formed one final observation in the fading light. Some gifts come wrapped in seeming curses. My silence taught me to see healing where others saw only separation. Sarah reached across the space between their chairs to take the young woman's hand. No response was necessary. They had long since learned that the most profound communications often required no words at all. In the vast Wyoming wilderness, where two civilizations had collided with often tragic consequences, an extraordinary bridge had formed because a young girl without voice had found another way to speak. Through healing hands, observant eyes, and the courage to stand firmly. In two worlds that had forgotten their common humanity, her voice needed no sound to change both worlds forever. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.